Listen, the fame of Danish kings in days gone by, the daring feats of the famous king, shield sheathing, who deprived his enemies, many tribes of men, of their mead halls, he terrified their foes. An orphan boy, found by the sea, fate declared he rose, he won tribute from tribes across the sea, noble king and brave. And when the land was left bereft of him, the good God gave the father's fame to Beowulf his son, known throughout the land. Death to his foes, gold to his friends, he gave with his own hand. When Scyld was laid in the burning boat, given back to the sea, adorned with all his weapons and treasures, one last glimpse of glory, Beowulf led them in his place, until Healfdene, his son, led his men to war till his hair was grey, as his father had done. Herogar, Hrothgar, and Halga were his sons, Ursa was his daughter, and Hrothgar was the hero, kept his kinsmen safe from slaughter. Men lived for war, but Hrothgar won the loyalty of them all, and to salute their bravery he built a mighty mead hall. Artists and craftsmen from every tribe raised its walls in glory. Its name was Heorot, and all heroes who came to tell their story were given gold under the horns of the stag above the door, and Hrothgar gained more glory from this than any victory in war. The songs of bards, the strings of harps, echoed from the hall, the din of merry-making carried far from Heorot's walls. And in the dampness and the darkness of the murky moors, it reached the ears of one destined to darken Heorot's doors. The scriptures speak of Nephilim, a race of giants bred when fallen angels tempted mortal women to their beds. Such a one was Grendel, and like all the rest of his race, he carried the curse of Cain, kinslayer, fallen far from grace. The noise of the nobles drew him from misty marsh to mighty mead hall. He pounced on 30 thanes, passed out with drink, and destroyed them all. His vengeance was as violent in the day as in the night. Any dancing or drinking was followed by that sorrowful sight, till Heorot had to be abandoned, the best of halls laid bare. So many heroes fell at Grendel's hand, no more would dare. In shame and sorrow Hrothgar sat for 12 months and a day, and the smoke of sacrifice to the old gods rose to the sky. But the only answer from the old or new God Almighty was to carry news of Hrothgar's helplessness across the sea to Beowulf, champion of Hygelac, and his 14 thanes. The warband crossed the stormy sea to come to the aid of the Danes. When the watchmen on the cliff tops spied their weapons of war, the Geats, in all their gear, coming swiftly to the shore, he rode out to see the chief among them disembark. Once ashore, he found a spear pointing straight at his heart. The coastguard saw they meant to fight from the armour they were in, so before they put one foot forward, asked of their clan and kin. "I am Ecgtheow's son, and Hygelac's champion," said the boldest man. "We come to set Hrothgar, son of Healfdene, free from his curse if we can. Our minds are keen as our muscles. We know how your bond can be broken. We are Geats, come to ensure Heorot, hall of the Danes, remains unshaken." "I have seen no deeds," said the watchman, "only lofty speech, but for all that I see you come to our lord and land in peace. I'll get you warm and dry, and guard your ship from the storm, and then you shall see Heorot, highest of halls, in the shining dawn." So their shields shining in the sun, and a forest of spears held high, they were met at the mead hall by Wulfgar, a willing ally. He hailed and wassailed them and theirs to Hrothgar his lord, and Hrothgar, friend of Beowulf's father, promised the richest reward and the warmest welcome, for he knew the day had come at last for Ecgtheow's son to pay his father's debt from days long past. When Hithelaf the Wilfling was slain at Ecgtheow's hand, and Hrothgar, then a young prince, gave him refuge in his land. Hrothgar sent treasure across the sea to appease the Wilflings with, and in return Beowulf returned, in the armour of Wayland Smith. to face the fearsome Grendel, who no weapon on earth could defeat, to beat him with his own bare hands, and stand on his own 2 feet. But there was one who didn't welcome Beowulf with open arms. On Unferth, son of Ecglaf, Hrothgar's mead had worked its charm, made him over bold and boastful, to blacken Beowulf's name. For how can a man who lost a swimming race make good his claim? How can bare hands beat a beast that couldn't carry a man on the sea? My foe swam ahead, admitted Beowulf, but you did not see the storm that raged behind me, or the monsters stirring the waves, that I sent back to the depths one by one. And if you're so brave, Unferth, son of Ecglaf, why do they say your sword ran red with the blood of your brothers when you found them in your mother's bed? If your blade was as sharp as your words, when Grendel came to call, there would be no need of Geats to ride to your aid at all. Wealhtheow Helming, Hrothgar's queen, hailed the hero with mead. But soon the darkness fell, and Beowulf rose in that hour of need. As Wealhtheow went to Hrothgar's bed, Beowulf stripped off his arms, for no weapon he wielded could withstand grave Grendel's charms. That night the mead hall was guarded by Geats, and many of them fell to the beast Grendel, called the Grinder, for many had heard tell that he ground his teeth when left bereft in his lonely barren home, and when disturbed by any men he would grind up their bones. Beowulf swore the beast would slay no more of his clan and kin, and gripped tightly to Grendel's arm with all his mighty limbs. With his other arm Grendel wreaked havoc in the hall, and whoever else but Beowulf came at him, he crushed them all. But Beowulf would not let go, and the beast's blood burned with the strain. The muscles tore, the bones cracked, the arm was severed. Grendel was slain. Hrothgar the Just had his skald, both a singer and a sage, sing Beowulf's name beside Sigmund and Heremod, heroes of the age. And Hrothgar had Wealhtheow his queen adorned Beowulf with armour, weapons, horses, and banners carried by Healfdene his royal father. Unferth, son of Ecglaf, boasted less as Beowulf told his story, while Hrothgar's banners flew anew, Herot restored to glory. Gifts were given to every thane who fought by Beowulf's side. Gold was given to the value of the virtue of those who had died. Hrothgar's songsmith graced the mighty heroes in the mead hall with singing and strumming of harp strings, and a tale that touched them all. He played the lay of Finn the Frisian, and the moral of the story he told was how many times the price of peace had been the blood of the bold. Wealhtheow, a warning ringing in her heart for the safety of her sons, had Beowulf swear peace between their houses as his father had done, and in return with her own hands she doubled his gifts of gold with graven armour and adornments worn by the lords of old. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you shall die. While Beowulf slept safely, Herot's gatekeeper heard the cry of Grendel's vengeful mother, just as monstrous as her child, foul foundling with no father, raised in the wastelands and the wild. And Esher, brother of Ermenlaf, fell to the fierce hand of that distant descendant of Cain who kept the dark lanes of the land. With the rising sun she crept back down to the mist and the mire, and Hrothgar himself lit his faithful friend's funeral pyre. He summoned Beowulf and what was left of his war band to hear how she had come to reclaim her son's severed hand, and send him hunting to a moor in the mountains where a stream flowed into a pool with the fire in the midst, turning water to steam. There lived sea serpents, demons of the deep, and Esher's severed head. Unferth, son of Ecglaf, ran out of boasting words and fled. But first he begged Beowulf's forgiveness for his former words, and into the hunter's hand he placed Hrunting, his father's sword. Beowulf sent Unferth back with a message to Hrothgar his king, that if he was killed by the witch or the water, his thanes get everything their courage deserved, and Beowulf's portion to Hygelac his lord. And with that Beowulf dived into the depths, swinging his sword. So deep and dark and wild was the water, Hrunting fell from his hand, and the mother monster dragged him down to a cave as dry land. There Grendel's body lay, surrounded by his victim's stolen gold. Amongst the treasures stood a sword, forged for the giants of old, and with it Beowulf severed the heads of the mother and her son. With the poison in their blood, the blade melted like ice in the sun. Hrothgar stood with Beowulf's thanes, waiting by the waterside, and the signs of Beowulf's victory came that could not be denied. Grendel's head and the great sword hilt floated to the top. By the time Beowulf returned, his song was sung by skald and scop. Engraved in runes on the sword hilt was the tale of the giants' race. It hung in the hall, the price of peace, ever before Hrothgar's face. After the fighting came feasting, but Hrothgar gave Beowulf wise truth. Be grateful, not too boastful, of the strength that is yours in your youth. If you serve only your own pride, struggle and strife will increase. Use your power to bring your people prosperity and peace. With those words he sent the hero home, with treasure for all his thanes. Thus was the age-old enmity ended between the Geats and the Danes. Unferth took back Hrunting, and Beowulf sailed away in glory, and gave his treasures to King Hygelac to prove the truth of his story. And the soldier who struggled to gain any glory when he was a boy, as a man was given land to rule with generosity and joy. After King Hygelac and his kin had fallen on the battlefield, Beowulf wore the crown, wise warrior for 50 turns of the wheel, until the day an ancient evil was woken by a wandering slave, who stole a golden drinking horn from the sleeping dragon's cave. Inside a hollow hill of stone, an untold hoard of treasure. The smith who forged it, long since dead, his craft kept safe forever. When the guardian of the gold, the last survivor of his race, remembered where men first mined the gold and took it back to that place, and the ancient dragon waited for the wandering hermit's death, and for 300 years haunted the barrow with his fiery breath, until the renegade slave crossed the wasteland and took to thieving, and brought proof of the hoard to his lord to try and buy his freedom. But where the slave had crept by the beast as he slept to pick his plunder, his greedy lord grabbed all he could, and the dragon rose with thunder, waiting for the deepest darkness, then lighting the night with fire. Greedy for vengeance, he burned their buildings. Death was his desire. Beowulf had the smith of his castle forge an iron shield. Neither to monsters nor their mothers would his courage yield. He and his men survived the battle where Hygelac breathed his last breath. Now boldly he rode to the dragon's den, to single combat and death. Since his 7th summer Beowulf battled, he knew no other thing. He even had a hand in the family feud that made Lord Hygelac king. Now the slave who stole from the dragon's cave led him and his thanes to meet a monster for his people, as he once did for the Danes. He rode to where the poison smoke poured out from an archway of stone. Unwilling to sacrifice any more of his men, he went in alone. The dragon's flame defeated every weapon he wore in that strife, and all his thanes gave in to fear. But one man's courage survived. Wiglaf, who would never abandon a warrior so bold, rode in and raised a sword he won in battle with giants of old, plunged it into the dragon's chest to rescue his sword brother. And then both Beowulf and the beast dealt the death blow to each other. The dragon held Beowulf in its teeth, but Beowulf cut its throat, and Beowulf knew he'd soon be sailing on the burning boat. The dragon slithered back inside the cave, and there it died. and faithful Wiglaf hurried to his fallen master's side. Beowulf drank a drop of water and spoke his last words on this earth. Plunder the gold, show me what my life and death was worth. Wiglaf crawled over the dragon's corpse and brought to his lord's sight treasures and royal regalia of giants and dwarves shining bright, that Beowulf could die gazing on the prize his sacrifice had won, and swore to build such a burial place for Beowulf when he was done. But when he saw his cowardly companions coming out of hiding, he roared, "Beowulf gave you the armour you wear, the horses you're riding. He died with pride, but you shall live with shame hung over your heads. Where were any of you to drag him back from the doors of the dead? Where were any of you when your blades could save the life of your lord? Now not one of you shall taste the treasure of that hellish hoard." On the lips of singers and storytellers went forth the word. Swedes and Danes who had grudges against the Geats happily heard that Beowulf had hunted a beast, and he was slain in the chase, and there was no single thane worthy to take his high place. But Beowulf's people burned his body, and when the flames had died, 10 days they toiled on a mighty memorial and laid the treasures inside. So the war they feared from the foes around them never came, as they held high their heads and hearts with pride at Beowulf's fame. For none would dare tear down the barrow or plunder the treasure hoard of Beowulf the bold, mightiest man to ever lift a sword.